Let me start out with a scripture reading today. This is Palm Sunday, and yet this is not going to be the traditional reading. It's going to be one from Luke that actually precedes it. Jesus is on his way. We've talked about this theme of the road less traveled. And something happens on the way, not to Jesus. Let me read the scripture. It's Luke 19, verses 1 through 4. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man there was Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and rich. He was hoping to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus, because Jesus was going to pass that way. If you're familiar with that story, you know it goes on from there. But we're not going to talk about that necessarily today. Instead, we're going to talk about something that happens in the midst of this. Hope. But as Dale said, if I were to make a title for this, it would be Hope, a Risky Place. Let me back up a couple steps because I want to give a shout out, give a word of thanks to Patricia Calvito. A month ago or so, she sent out a reading to the women's group. They do that quite often, send out a reading beforehand. And this was about hope that she had found. An author had done this reading. It was something to the effect of, yes, we can have hope. But in this book, the author referenced another book, Hope in the Dark, by Rebecca Colvett. Now, this is a fascinating book. Nancy, my wife, she read the reading, and she handed it to me and said, you need to read this too. Over the years, I've come to realize that when she tells me to read something, I should read it. I did. And she was right. It really was very, very well written, and it made a lot of sense. But what struck me was the reference to this book, Hope in the Dark. I was curious about it. I went online and started hearing that this was really quite an inspirational and meaningful book, so I got it. I just about made it all the way through reading it. And it looks at hope from a different direction. One that I must admit I fail to do quite often. You see, in the very beginning of the book, the author talks about what hope isn't. What hope isn't is hoping for something. Putting a specific end result as part of what you're hoping for. Now, I don't know about you. I do that all the time. You hear it in my voice, in the things I say. I hope your family is doing well. I hope the weather's going to be nice, especially for May 15th. I hope my sports teams do well. I hope this, I hope this, I hope this. I tie something to hope. It becomes hoping for something, a wish list. You can reverse it if you want. You can hope that something doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't rain. I hope this particular politician does not get elected. I hope this. I hope the team that's playing my favorite sports team has a really bad day. I can put almost anything to that concept of hoping for something. It's my wish list. This is what I want to see happen. But that's not what hope is. From the book, let me read 3 statements that she has that hit me. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen. And that, in the spaciousness of uncertainty, is room to act. Did you catch that last part? that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. Another statement, she says that it's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact are not things we can know beforehand. And one last statement, hopefulness is risky, since it is, after all, a form of trust. Trust in the unknown and trust in the possible. Those three statements kind of set me in a different path, sent me in a different direction of what hope really is. I think a lot of times we know hope in this manner is deep and meaningful, and yet we take the casual interpretation of hoping, and we never get to hope. And apparently, because this book was written for activists, actually, it was written because this woman continued to see her friends, her colleagues, the activists that were trying to change the world get burned out, get worn out. Because they sometimes full bore ahead went into something, a project, a mission, to right a wrong, to combat injustice. And they had this end result in mind, and quite often it didn't work out. And they felt like a failure. They felt like, is it ever going to happen? And they ended up giving up or not having that passion that fueled them. They just quit. Because what they really dreamed of happening, what they really hoped for, it's on down the road. It's not going to happen today. And that was hard on them. Sometimes too hard. And so that's why she understood that hope really is that which we experience in, did you catch that? The spaciousness of uncertainty. Now, I often look at it the other way. It's the scarcity in uncertainty. Let's face it, we don't like uncertainty. We don't like it. It not only irritates us, but sometimes it brings us fear. It brings us unknowing what we wish we knew. And so we struggle with it. But this author talks about the spaciousness, the openness of uncertainty. It's that in the unknowing that we can still thrive, we can still reach out, we can still matter. Because somehow, some way, we trust in the possibility. We trust in the potential. Even though we can't name it, even though we can't identify exactly what it's going to look like, how it's going to feel, how it's going to happen, we can still believe that when we show up, when we give our best, when we are there, the potential remains. We may never see that tree grow. I had a fascinating text a couple months ago. A young man, Jeff, had attended some of the church camps there in Idaho. He was in high school. He knew some of the kids, but Jeff was a little bit on the outside. He never came to church. He really was an unbeliever, if you ask him. And through this week, we had a chance to connect. A couple months ago, Jeff sent me a text saying, Reverend Garrett, you probably don't remember me, but I just want to say thank you. That time at church camp made all the difference in the world to me. Thank you. Out of the clear blue sky, I never would have expected that what happened at that church camp would have made that impact. But we still held church camp. We still showed up. We still did what we thought we needed to do, and we did in such a way of commitment and passion. You never know. That's what this author is talking about hope is. That we can free ourselves from thinking it has to achieve a specific result, because sometimes that doesn't happen, at least not on our time schedule, at least not in the way that we even think it should happen, not in how we would create it, how we would plan it, how we would orchestrate it, how we would manage it. Instead, it evolves quite often. It's a trust thing. Remember Zacchaeus? We mentioned him earlier. For some reason, I think this is a story about hope. Now, I've got to fill in some gaps here, because we don't know that much about this story when it really comes down to it. We know that Jesus had already said he's going to Jerusalem. This is the trip. He's on his road. Jericho is on the way. It's about 25 miles outside of Jerusalem. So it's a day's walk for people back then. And apparently there's a group of people that are with Jesus. We don't know who they are. We assume it was some of his closest followers. We don't know whether on the way there, some people kept hearing about who this Jesus of Nazareth was, and I want to see what else he has to say. I want to see what's going to happen. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was because they were hearing things that Jesus said that they hadn't heard, and it was resonating with them somehow. We don't know. But there apparently were some people with Jesus, and as they approached Jericho, maybe somebody said, hey, there's a crowd of people coming. We don't know exactly who they are, but somehow maybe word got out that there's this Jesus of Nazareth, and he talks a lot about love. He talks about, and they started sharing some of the things that Jesus was living and doing. And maybe that word got a little out. Maybe Zacchaeus, maybe he heard it. Now, you remember Zacchaeus, tax collector? You remember how that worked? He was kind of a free agent, you might say. He worked for the state, but he had kind of two pockets. One pocket was the money he collected for Caesar's tax. The other pocket, that was his commission, you might say. That was whatever he could charge in addition and get away with it. And he did. And apparently he was rich to the expense of others. So Zacchaeus was there. Why was he there? Did he think that maybe there's a group coming in and I can tax them? Was he wondering what he was going to see, just curiosity, or was there something deeper happening? Was there something, and I'm just putting it out here. Could it have possibly been that Zacchaeus was looking at his life and just wondering, is this who I am? Is this what I want to be about? I like the money. I like the riches. But sometimes that's not enough, is it? What am I missing? What's that emptiness in my life that I'm feeling? We do that. He might have done that. There's times when we evaluate our lives, when we take seriously who we are and what that means, and we just wonder. So Zacchaeus, maybe, he was feeling some of these thoughts. There were a lot of people in the crowds that went to see Jesus that they needed healing. They self-diagnosed themselves that they needed some help in being whole. So maybe Zacchaeus was one of those people. Maybe so. And so maybe Zacchaeus goes and, now I can picture this scene. The people are starting to gather on the route that Jesus and his followers are going to come. And some of them see Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is here. We have any tall people here? Come up to the front. And maybe scoot together. We don't think we have to let Zacchaeus see what's going on. Maybe they were a little passive-aggressive and just finding a way to make sure that Zacchaeus couldn't see what was going on. And so what does Zacchaeus do? And to me, this is that moment of hope. He climbs a tree. We know that he's short, but there is something driving him to climb a tree, to just see that spaciousness of uncertainty. He had no idea what was getting ready to happen. If you read on, you find out that Jesus sees him and tells him to come down and we're going to have dinner tonight. And it changes his life. Zacchaeus is remade, you might say, but he was ready for it. Remember that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will come? That comes in many different forms and fashions. When the student is ready, the teacher will come. Maybe Zacchaeus was there. He just knew that there was something that he needed to do. He didn't know what, he didn't know how, but he saw that tree. And that was the closest way he could figure out to be able to see Jesus. What if? In that uncertainty, there was this spaciousness. What if he was allowing himself to ponder? What if he was allowing himself to live in that spaciousness of uncertainty? So he climbs the tree. And we know the difference. Isn't hope something that we all need? Especially when you define it, especially when you look at it from that perspective, that it's daring to live in the spaciousness of uncertainty. Because we live in an era of uncertainty, don't we? And I would say we always have. We've always, as humanoids, lived in uncertainty. There's always something coming up that we pondered about, we worried about, we wondered how it was going to turn out. We've always done that. We have the ability to name it these days, and we do, rightfully so. But how do we address that? Or even more than that, how do we address the emptiness that sometimes we feel? When we just feel like I'm a little bit out of balance, or maybe there's something else that will fulfill me, help me. We do that. The companies that sell everything rely on you wanting that. Whether it's whiter teeth, a bigger car, a nicer house, whatever it might be, that's kind of the human condition. We tend to seek out and search for that which will make us whole. That's our nature. Biology-wise, organism-wise, that's the way we are. We will do what it takes to thrive. We will do what it takes to grow. We will do what it takes if we allow ourselves to do that. But to do that, do we not have to live in that spaciousness of uncertainty? Where we don't have to know the guarantees, we don't have to know exactly how it's going to turn out, but we trust the process of believing in the potential of love, the potential of caring, the potential for respect, the potential go down the line. Oh yes, we know there's danger out there. There's danger out there. We know that. And we can run into that just as easily. But have you ever noticed that we also run into love? We also run into caring. We also run into those times and people who they're willing to embrace us and care with us. The potential is there. Are we willing to risk being vulnerable? Are we willing to risk giving ourselves to that moment, to the possibility, not having to have guarantees, not having to have promises, but engaging? Many years ago, when I was in seminary, I was, as my practicum, I was leading a vacation Bible school. And I did such a magnificent job of micromanaging everything. That was my personality, still is to some degree. The real director pulled me over the side after a while and said, "Bill, have you learned how to trust the process?" My answer, no. You need to. Trust the process. That's living in the spaciousness of uncertainty. It takes confidence in the potential, in the possibilities. It takes confidence and trust in love, in God, however you define God's presence. That's what hope is. And I think that's what we need to celebrate and to embrace. Because when it really comes down to it, that's when we embrace this trust. When we embrace this, not scarcity in doubt, in concerns, but the spaciousness of uncertainty. I think that's when not only we change ourselves, but we change the world. And isn't that why we're here?